we are ready to start in
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey everybody, I'm Eddie with Geologic chapter,
meetings from
and I'm so pleased to have with us tonight David Nelson. He is our rare plant chair in the Geologic chapter, and he's been studying San Bruno Mountain. San Bruno Mountain is the finest preserved section of the Franciscan ecoregion, which goes from San Bruno through the spine of San Francisco and up into southern Marin County. And it has the best preserved area of the remaining Franciscan that there is. So we've been able to repopulate quite a few areas in San Francisco by using plants in San Bruno Mountain. And David and San Bruno Mountain Watch have been our partners in doing that. And I'm gonna let Dave talk about a little bit about his and Doug Allshouse's journey on San Bruno Mountain.
Thank you, Eddie.
Sure. All right.
Let's see if this works. So that's one of my thoughts. It's not advancing.
to the left, oh,
I'm
okay.
using the left one.
Well, let me sit there and I will advance. it
No,
for you.
no, you can't do that. It's too dynamic.
Okay, sorry.
It won't work.
Okay, so I'm. I think you might have to leave it here. I'll leave it on the table, sorry.
That'll be challenging. Okay, we'll see what happens.
Okay, now it's going backwards, okay? All right,
Now it's going forwards
all right.
on the table.
Yeah.
Do you think I just need to point it at the dongle? Let's see. Yes, let's try and see if that will work. Okay. So, this is Doug Allshouse. He's the co-author on the book. And you can read about him there. This is gonna be interesting. All right, so we wrote a book, San Bruno Mountain, a guide to the flora and fauna. And this is the book. And you can see the mountain is a green oasis in the middle of a city. It's printed by Heyday Books in cooperation with CNPS. Let's see, we can kill the discussions at the bottom.
Oops, sorry.
Thank you. So you can buy it online at Heyday Books. And if you do that, then Heyday makes some money. They're a nonprofit. You buy it from Amazon, Amazon makes the money. I'd rather you buy it from Heyday. At some point, it should be in the CNPS bookstore because it is co-produced by CNPS. Okay, and here's the front and the back cover together. And what you see there is a green mountain that's supplied by fog that still exists in the middle of an urban desert and has not yet been killed off. Okay, well, come January, we'll have done this for 10 years. So we call this a day at the office. And it was an absolute joy to be able to work in this office and work with Doug. I told him at the beginning of it that at the end of this, you'll have worn out 3 pairs of shoes. You'll know 5 times more than you did before, and you're either gonna hate me or you're gonna love me. And he's worn out more shoes than that. He's learned a lot more than that, and we're very close buddies. It's really been a great joy to work with Doug. Okay, so where's San Bruno Mountain? Here's San Francisco. This is the border between San Francisco and San Mateo, and right here, that is San Bruno Mountain. So everybody sees San Bruno Mountain as they go from the airport to the city. And we all know San Bruno Mountain, you've all seen it. Actually, Vivian, do you mind? I just got back from a trip and I just got a couple of slides. I'd like to show you a couple of other slides. Let me just exit this thing and go over here to, wait a minute. I've got it on this part right here. Let me click. Okay. I went on this trip and it was wild. There was jungles, thick stuff, and you can't believe how thick it was, but you could guess from that. And we'd sometimes walk up these dry creeks with these wild, crazy trees. Sometimes we'd go up the path to go next to little creeks. But if you get up higher, you run into ferns that are taller than a person. You get flowers that look like ours, but it's a totally different species, same genus. And you wouldn't see a tree like that around here. It's just all blossoms. You go up over the top where we were, and you come to deserts, and all the plants are specialized for deserts and dunes, and they have little hairs on the plants to try to keep them from drying out. It was a really great trip. And you know where I was? That was San Bruno Mountain. Every single one of those pictures is San Bruno Mountain. You think you know it because you drive by it on the freeway, whether it's 280 or 101, you see it. And it looks like a bald mountain with radio towers. And you don't know San Bruno Mountain until you get out and you look. Because it's, although it looks like this from the freeway, if you look at it from the air, it's got all these little canyons. Some face the ocean, some face the bay. Some are full of trees, some are bare rock. And you really don't know it unless you get out there. So we don't call it San Bruno Mountain. We call it San Bruno Mountain University because it's always teaching us things. And for instance, you see here in this picture, right at this little dot, that's a totally nondescript location, right? All it's got is poison oak and coyote brush. One of our rare plants is only there. The amount of it is smaller than one of these tables, and that's the only place on the mountain where it is. You've got to go through every thicket, every patch of poison oak if you're going to find all the secrets at San Bruno Mountain. Now, everybody claims that their area that they're protecting is special, right? So what is my justification for saying that San Bruno Mountain is special? Well, let's go to Willis Jepson. He wrote his first book in 1925, and he said there are 10 areas of endemism in the state. And the 10th area in the state is right here, and it's the Franciscan zone. It's not the same thing as the, that's a geologic term, but they're highly correlated. Now, Jim Roof was a self-taught botanist, and he grew up in the area, and he knew the area very, very well. And he disagreed with Jepson. He said, no, the area of endemism is just a little bit of southern Marin, San Francisco Peninsula, and the green dot below, that's San Bruno Mountain. And he called this the Franciscan zone, but in current terminology, it's too small for a zone. It really should be called the Franciscan landscape. So what about the Franciscan landscape makes it, giving it unique plants? Okay, so for instance, all these other counties around there, and you represent a number of them, why is San Bruno Mountain with unique plants? Why? Well, I think the answer lies in geology, and I'll tell you why. The unique plants of San Bruno Mountain come from what was there before, right? So you're going to have paleoendemics and neoendemics. This is Raven and Axelrod's work. But then it'll be determined by what's in the soil, and the soil is based on geology. It's also going to be dependent on the climate. And the climate is two things, the water regime and the temperature regime. But what I want to concentrate is just on the geology. Why is the geology making San Bruno Mountain unique? Well, here is a drawing of the peninsula of San Francisco. And right here, that's the San Bruno Mountain terrain. And the peninsula is formed of the San Bruno Mountain terrain, Marin Headlands terrain, and the Alcatraz terrain, each separated by a melange zone or a fault zone. Now, what's a terrain? Terrain's actually a shortened term for a tectono-stratigraphic terrain. But what's a terrain? A terrain is a fragment of the Earth's crust that has been scraped off one tectonic plate and accreted on to another tectonic plate. It's surrounded by faults, and all of the adjacent terrains have a unique geologic history that's different. All right, now, a way of thinking about this is if you had muddy boots and you came up to a rock or a log and you scraped your boot, you'd get a line of mud. And if you scraped it again, you get another line of mud. And that's what's happening when two tectonic plates collide and one scrapes material onto the other. So a terrain is a fragment of the Earth's crust scraped off one tectonic plate, and it's accreted onto another tectonic plate. It's surrounded by faults, it's unique, and all the adjacent areas of geology have a unique history. It's different. So that's a terrain. Now, all of California, west of the Sierra foothills, is just a series of terrains that have been accreted onto North American plate. Okay, so the Farallon plate is the oceanic plate. It was there before the Pacific plate. The Farallon plate is subducted under the western edge of the North American plate. So here's the Farallon plate on the upper left, North American plate on the right. When they collide, they put geology onto the North American continent, and that's a terrain. San Bruno Mountain is formed by a single terrain, and it's different from the other terrains. For instance, Montero Mountain is granite from San Diego or greywacke, and I'll explain that. So, what kind of rock? We're greywacke. Greywacke, we've got a little bit of regularity and chert, and you can't talk to CNPS without talking about serpentine, right? So let's talk first about greywacke. So what's greywacke? These are two samples of greywacke rock from San Bruno Mountain that I've polished. The one on the right is fine, the one on the left is coarse. But greywacke has multiple sizes of sand grains. It's called poorly sorted. That's what poorly sorted means, multiple sizes. And here's a close-up view of one of those rocks. And you can see the sand grains are all different sizes. Normally, sandstone is going to be of a uniform size. So this is interesting. A rose is a rose is a rose, but sand is not sand, is not sand. Sand has nothing to do with the material. It only has to do with size. So sand can be quartz or it could be fish bones, and it's still sand. Now, sand is identified by its size, not its material. Okay. It's poorly sorted, and this comes from undersea avalanches on the continental slope. So what happens here, you can see this diagram, that on the continental shelf, the debris that's falling off North America, because Rockies used to be twice as tall, it's going onto the continental shelf. And as that fills up, it falls down the continental slope. If you mix sand and water, it's heavier than just the water, so it flows downhill. It can flow hundreds of miles, and then it accumulates down below. This flow is called a turbidity current, and the rock that it forms is called a turbidite. So greywacke is a turbidite. It's caused by flowing sand coming down the continental slope, and that's why it's multiple sizes of grains. So it comes from the Sierra and the Cascades. They've been washed out the Golden Gate. And based on detrital zircon, uranium to lead geochronology, it was formed 52 million years ago. That means the rock was formed 52 million years ago. It doesn't mean San Bruno Mountain is that old. And it was formed in the abyssal depths of the ocean. And then how to get on the San Bruno Mountain? Plate tectonics, okay? So we've got greywacke, we've got radiolarian chert. I'm not going to talk about that. I know because at CNPS we have to talk about serpentine, but we only have a very limited area of serpentine. It's about 20 meters by 100 meters, and there are no serpentine endemics or facultative. So it's not really important. But serpentine comes from the mantle, and you know it's called ultramafic rock. The Ma is from magnesium, the Fic is from ferric, iron. So it's very high in magnesium and iron. But we have no serpentine endemics. We've looked very closely, we don't see anything. So the geology of San Bruno Mountain is because it's all one terrain of greywacke, which is coming from the depths of the ocean. Now, plate tectonics is a unifying theory for geology, just as evolution is a unifying theory for biology. In biology, nothing makes sense outside of evolution. In geology, nothing makes sense outside of plate tectonics. San Francisco is the type location. There are type locations for rocks. This are for plants. It's a type location for the Franciscan Formation. And the Franciscan Formation was key on our understanding of the accretionary formation of land, and plate tectonics and accretionary prism are what formed San Bruno Mountain. Okay, so I think the answer for unique plants of San Bruno Mountain is our unique geology. Now, San Francisco and San Bruno Mountain share the same geology. we're formed uniquely of the San Bruno Mountain terrain, but San Francisco is formed of Marin headlands terrain and the Alcatraz terrain. Therefore, we share unique plants. And you probably know about the Kotzebue expedition, right? And the Rurik coming into San Francisco Bay in 1816 was the first wide-scale biological exploration of our area. And the people on the ship, their names are throughout our names. So Chamiso, Lucanus chamisonis was named for him. Chorus is popcorn flower, Plagiobothus coraceanus. Eschscholtz was the physician. We all know Eschscholtzia californica, right? Romanzoff was the one who financed the expedition, and Romanzoffia californica is Miss Maidens. So all that comes from the Rurik. So if you want to see what San Francisco had at the time of the Rurik, come up to San Bruno Mountain. We did not pave it over the way San Francisco did. Okay, so let's get to some plants. That's enough history, right? You guys want to see plants. We've got 15 rare, threatened and endangered species. 5 taxa are endemic, and I'll show you each of these. There are 5 RTEs, 2 that are extirpated but rediscovered, and 2 species which are gone. So these are our endemic taxa. They're mostly manzanitas. The last one's a huckleberry. Let's talk about them. The reason I call them taxa is these 2 are not full species. The reason is that most or a third of manzanitas are polyploid. They speciate very easily. Arctostaphylos uber-ursi is the only manzanita found all around the northern hemisphere. You'll find it in Italy, you'll find it in Greece. Certainly these are different than the ones we've got, because since Pangea broke up, there's a lot of time for them to evolve, right? So Parker and Vasey don't want to call any uber-ursi a species until they've done the DNA. So we're kind of stuck. But they've told us that they've been up there on the mountain with us. And I don't know if Parker and Vasey, you guys wrote the Manzanita book. They did the Jetson Manual, they did the Flora of North America. Okay. So they're polyploid. And they said taxonomy is still evolving and they don't want to call anything in print. But they told us, yes, we can say this. Now, California is the world center for all manzanitas, as you know. 106 of 107 grow here. 1 is in South America. So the Central Coast is the center for manzanita diversity, and San Bruno Mountain is the center for speciation. In fact, Pacific Rock is called Ground Zero by Parker and Vasey. We've got several plants there. We know hybrids of different species. They simply haven't been described. Okay, so endemic taxa. These 2 are fully recognized species. San Bruno Mountain manzanita is the first one, and Pacific manzanita. And the last one was just described 3 years ago by Rich and my co-author, Doug Allshouse. It was published in Madrona. So these are the endemic taxa. So let's look at them. This is called Manzanita Dyke. This is where we've got the San Bruno Mountain manzanita, a 1B1. And you look at the, first about Alice Eastwood. Well known Alice Eastwood. And she described it in 1931. It was interesting. The specimen she described was collected in 1915 by Marin Campbell. It sat around for a long time. And finally she described it. And this is before Radio Road was put up there. So I don't know how these women hiked up there. And you can see it's a pretty low plant. I mean, it's not as tall as these guys' shoelaces. So it's been described by Parker and Vasey as very prostrate. The leaves are imbricated, overlapped, kind of like this diagram. You can see that pretty easily. It's a light green. Most of the manzanitas we have are darker. It's a light green. And it's, you know that manzanitas are described by characters other than the flower. Normally we describe things by the flower, right? Because that's one most subjected to evolutionary pressures. But all the manzanitas have these little umbels. So you have to look at other things. You look at leaf shape, petiole length, where the hairs are, where the stomata are. So the Arctostaphylos imbricata has a very short petiole. It's lobed or cordate at the base. And this is a picture of the stomata taken with an iPhone with a little magnifier on it. And that stomata both above and below. And it's a beautiful little flower. You'll see it December, January-ish. And this is what you get when you give PG&E permission to brush Radio Road. Now, the road is over there on the right. You see the little bluish part? And if you give a guy a brusher, he's gonna just brush everything along. So this used to be a bed of Arctocephalus imbricata. Here it's our protected species, it's the name of the park, and they brush it down. Luckily, this all came back quite nicely, but it was very frustrating to go out there that day and see it all shredded up. Okay. Now, prostrate, is it really prostrate? I mean, I just showed you this picture, it's not as high as their shoelaces. But here's Doug, who's 5'9", and it's almost as tall as he is. It's not a prostrate shrub, it depends where it's growing. On the left side, that's pure rock, it's the crest of a ridge. Where Doug is standing, I've dug down 6 inches and I still find good soil. So I think that it's dependent on the soil conditions, and it's not really prostrate, but you'll see that's how it's described. More research is needed, and that's what makes writing a book fun and running into people like Parker and Batesy and being able to engage them in a discussion. Okay. This is our other endemic species. This is Pacific manzanita. It was described by Jim Roof in 1964. There are only 2 known plants on the entire mountain, but because it's significantly different than other manzanitas on the mountain, Parker and Batesy agree with Roof, it is a separate species. Now, it's a 1B2. Wait a minute, how can it be 1B2? There's only 2 of them in the planet. They're right next to each other. You had a fire or a moth, they'd both be gone. So we petitioned Aaron and we got it made a 1B1. So it's now a 1B1. That was kind of fun. So the leaves are spreading, the plant's fairly prostrate, slightly mounding. Beautiful white flower, thick, typical manzanita leaves. You notice how dark green they are. Short, non-glandular, hairy, new growth on it. Here are the leaves. You can see it's got a petiole. Remember, imbricata had no petiole. And it's got stomata above and below. Beautiful little flower. Okay. Here is another one. This is Leo Brewery. Leo Brewer was said to have the largest native plant garden in the Bay Area. He was a professor at Berkeley. He taught Roof. He was a professor of high temperature chemistry as part of the Manhattan Project. And Roof was very fond of him, and because Brewery was devoted to California native plants, named this after him. So Leo Brewer's manzanita. And Jim Roof described it in about 1964. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. So it's mounded, and you see here's 1, 2, 3 plants. These were planted here. I'll get to that later. The leaves are ascending or spreading. They've got a petiole. It's got an acute base. No stomata above. Look at that. Okay, so stomata below, but not above. And it's a very pretty little flower. When it first comes out, bifacial, it means it's a different color on top and bottom. When it first comes out, it's very, very pink. It's the pinkest of all of our flowers. And when it's mature, it's white. So Leo Brewer's manzanita. And this is our other forma. This is miniature manzanita, suborbiculata. It was described by Walter Knight, who worked at the East Bay Regional Parks Garden and was co-author on one of the books about San Bruno Mountain. It's very mounded. It's spreading. It's got a light colored margin. It's got a long petiole and the typical manzanita flower. Okay. Now, we have 2 that are endemic and grow in one other place. I like to show you those. This is Montera manzanita, Monteraensis. Now, remember, Doug is 5'9". This plant's taller than he is, and it's about 5 feet further down the hill than he is. So this is our tallest manzanita by far. And if you look at the bases are quite thick, and it's got the typical manzanita red bark. It's got the imbricated leaf. No petiole, tip acute, base cordate. It's isofacial, so it's the same colors, top and bottom. And here it is. Again, the beautiful little manzanita flower. In February, it's got a ton of gorgeous white flowers, more than any of our other plants. And you come back and you visit in August, and they're all now little manzanita berries. Obviously, manzanita means little apple. So it's quite prolific. Our other one is this. This is San Francisco Lysingea. It's only found in two places, San Bruno Mountain and the Presidium. They've done DNA, and they're actually different on their DNA, but morphologically they're not similar, that they're both the same plant. They're small blossoms, are about 3/4 of an inch. You have to get real close to really appreciate their beauty. It's got that deep purpley throat, and it's a gorgeous little flower. Okay. Now, we have 4 that were presumed to be extirpated, and they have a very interesting history. So one of them is Plagiobothus parisianus, named for Chorus on the Rurik. It hadn't been seen for, I think it was 34 years. McClintock saw it in 1990, and then no one was able to find it. And we're out, Doug and I were out in that little canyon. Remember I showed you the red dot? We were down in this canyon, and I'm taking a photograph of a flower. And Doug says, "Dave, get off that. I think it's a rare." So I found it by standing on it. And here it is, chorus and popcorn flower. And you'll forgive me for standing on it because that's how big it is. It's about 3 millimeters. And the whole plant probably doesn't get taller than about 1.5 inches. So if you'll excuse me, I was standing on a rare plant, but that's how we found it. And the entire area of this plant is less than one of these tabletops. It's on a sandbank right next to an intermittent creek. And the creek, when it flows, clears off other plants, lays down a layer of gravel, and this is where it grows. And it's a gorgeous little plant. You have to get down there to really appreciate it. Now you can see it's Boraginaceae, right? Okay, another one, creek dogwood. The previous book was written by McClintock. She said it was rare in her 1960 book and not found in 1990. We do know, though, that scrub encroachment is growing because it's not extirpated. It's all over the place now. It's kind of fun. It's got an incredibly beautiful leaf, I think. A very nice flower. When fall comes, it's got beautiful berries and beautiful colored foliage. And then in the winter, you have these really bright red stems decorating the bog. So creek dogwood has come back, and it's quite common now in the bog. But others are not as lucky. Okay, you recognize this as bleeding heart. When they put in the parkway, like Guadalupe Parkway, they did it to help the Crocker Land Company develop the mountain. They're going to take 250,000 cubic yards off the mountain, barge it 26 miles down the bay and dump it. And they had a name for this land. It was going to be New Manhattan. It was going to be 17 times larger than Foster City. All right. So they built the road to help that. And when they did, they destroyed the only place where this was found. It was in the Colma Canyon, a place called the Swimming Hole. This is the way it was described in older literature. It is no longer there. It's all the Colma Creek is underground now. We have some from Crystal Springs. We're going to reintroduce it at some time, but we're going to wait a number of years to make sure that it totally can't find it. So that's where these pictures come from the ones that we've collected from Crystal Springs. Okay, now this one is gone. San Francisco owl's clover. It's gone. It grew with sea level to about 4 meters. It was out at Oyster Point. That's all now developed with high-rise industrial buildings. It's not found at all. So this is gone. So there's 2 that are gone. Now here's some that are rare but not endemic. Quactillus. The Mount Diablo sunflower, Coryzanthe, the Collinsia from San Francisco, Blepharis, Arabis blepharophylla, one of my favorites. We'll show you some real good pictures of that. And then Erisibum franciscanum, and somebody wanted to do some work with that. He's not here. Oh, there he is. Yes. Okay. So just contact me by that email. I'll be glad to set it up. Iris longipedala and Silene veracunda. Each of these plants has a tremendous amount of history with it. So these are the non-endemics. This is the Blepharophilia, rock cress. It's a very pretty little plant, gorgeous pink petals, as you see, and it's got the habit of growing on the worst spot. Look at that. I mean, that's a crack that the lichens have collected a little bit of silt, and then the moss maybe collect a little bit more, and then Blepharophilia comes along and thinks it's heaven because it's just blooming like crazy. It's a delicate flower, tends to fall apart pretty quickly. Here's another one growing in a little crack in the rock. Quite a cute little guy, if you ask me. All right, what about here? This is Coryzanthe, Cuscutata, spine flower, only grows in sand. When the sand starts to get stabilized by grass, it dies out. So there's a big project removing grasses and exotic plants from the sand dunes. It's got delicate little flowers, and you can see the hairs on the leaf to try to preserve its moisture. And this is one of the pictures I showed you, remember, before when I kind of distracted you. And gorgeous little flowers. The individual flowers are about 2 millimeters in size. And you can see even the flowers have hairs to try to slow down the movement of air and preserve moisture. This is San Francisco Collinsia. There's an area we call the Boneyard Quarry, and it's an old quarry, and there's a lot of block pits at the angle of repose. And for some reason, this plant just loves it. We call it Boneyard Quarry because there's lots of little bones all around. There's an owl nest up the quarry, and these are from owl pellets, and the rain dissolves the fur, etc., and leaves the bones. So there's bones all over. We call it Boneyard Quarry. And when we discovered these here, it was by far the largest amount of San Francisco Collinsia on the mountain. Usually you see it in ones and twos, and here there's hundreds. Now, this is our San Francisco wallflower. Has a wonderful aroma. How many people have smelled San Francisco wallflower? Right. Most people, the first time they smell it, they say, wow. And you're not the only one who likes it. Flies like it. Okay. And I'm going to recommend that when you come and smell a wallflower, be careful. There's flies there too, but do you know that fly's not standing up? What's going on? There's a crab spider that killed it. So when you go to smell the flowers, first make sure you don't have a crab spider looking down your nose. Here's a great one. This is longipedala, okay, coast iris, and all the crazy things that happen on San Bruno Mountain. In a field where these grow, the park decided to make a lawn. So they mow these every year before they flower. We find them in other places, but these rare plants are mowed every year by the park. And they know they're there. Okay. Now, here is one that has given us all sorts of heartaches. I've got an hour's talk just about this. This is the San Francisco Campion. And we looked for it for years and couldn't find it. It's a beautiful little carnation. It's got a striped calyx there. This is actually the very first plant we're able to find, growing off towards the ocean, away from any of the paths. But it's a gorgeous flower, and we always wonder, what's this called? All right. What about this? I mean, these are unique parts of the flower. And we looked all over the internet. We could not find any description. It's not in Jepson. It's not in Flora, North America. So I contacted the guy who wrote it, and he's a professor, I think, in Montana. And I said, well, do you have a picture that labels parts for your students? He didn't have any. So I worked hard. And I know that it's important because this is a drawing that Alice Eastwood did. It's in the California Academy of Sciences Herbarium. So what I did is I bought a book that had a bunch of pictures, but it didn't label them. And I kind of did reverse engineering. I looked for a text that said, it's got a really big la-di-da. Then I looked at the picture and found it was big there. So I drew these pictures, sent them to the author of Flora, North America. He said, yes, that is accurate. Can I have a copy? So hopefully it'll be somewhere. Okay, Mount Diablo sunflower. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's in the book. The picture's in the book. Okay, so Mount Diablo sunflower, it looks very much like a mule's ear, but it's different. Grows out in the grasslands. Only in one small area. Now I'll just show you a couple more and then we'll finish. This is clematis. There's only 2 plants, and it's interesting. They were planted there by some CNPS Johnny Appleseed, who thought it'd be nice to take some flower seeds and go plant them on San Bruno Mountain. We found it out by talking to somebody who knew who did this. Anyway, there's only 2 on the mountain. This is pretty rare. This is the coffee fern. There are 3 of these on the mountain. In one location, there's probably 3 or 4 plants, but in other 2 locations, there's a single plant. We've looked all over these. This is a favorite of mine. So every time we come along a rock formation, I'm always looking for it. You recognize this, and I've taken a bunch of pictures just because Trillium is such a pretty plant. We all love them. They don't last long. We've got 21 plants in 3 different widely spaced locations. One in the middle of the most god-awful poison oak forest. And we only found it because someone built an illegal trail, and it turned out they did it when they were blooming. And when they saw it, they called us and we looked at it. But so the Trillium. Now this is everyone he says a story. White picture stage. We were looking for this and we couldn't find it, and we finally found it. And the nursery, they're growing it. We said, where'd you find these? So they told us, and it's this awful little hill right on the edge of the parkway, full of coyote brush and poison oak, and right there. So you got to look everywhere. And I went off looking for a hornwort, and I found this down in the Devil's Arroyo, but it was such an awful area. I got in, but I couldn't get out. I ended up getting helicoptered out. Very embarrassing. Now, y'all recognize this is quite common, but we don't have very much Western Columbine. It grows in one location. It's been driven out of existence by scrub encroachment. So there's one location, there's probably 20 plants there. And we got out plants because the seeds have been collected before it was destroyed, and that's been distributed. So I think all of us have a special place for Columbine in our heart. Okay. These are some interesting stories. Leo Brewery, False Lily of the Valley, and Dune Tansy. Okay, you saw this picture before, and I told you they were planted. Well, Jim Ruth was a self-educated botanist. He grew up around Lake Merced. When he turned 18, moved up to Marin Headlands, tried to live off the land. He needed a job, and the Forest Service got him planting plants. And he got so good at it, when the East Bay Regional Parks wanted to do a bot garden, Jim Ruth was hired to do it. So he was the founding member of that. And he was hiking on the mountain one day, and he found a new manzanita. Now, he actually has described a number of manzanitas. He described Pacific manzanita. So he found this brand new manzanita, and it was May of 1964. But unfortunately, in September 1964, a fire came through it, burned it to the ground. Manzanitas come back either from seeds or stump sprouting. It never seeded, it never stump sprouted. It's destroyed. But I told you he was a gardener. The first day he found it, he took cuttings, and because he had talent in manzanitas, he was able to grow this. And in 1987, the East Bay Regional Park Garden wrote a letter. This is Steve Edwards, and he said to San Mateo, "Would you like your manzanita back?" And that's why we have it. So it's right here. And he said, "I've been dreaming of the possibility they may be reintroduced in the wild. Would you like it?" And of course, San Bruno Mountain said yes. And they planted it in 3 different places. And nobody wrote down where they planted it. Roman Yankin is now. He's in a nursing home in Sacramento. I called him, talked to him. He doesn't remember anything. Paul Reberg was co-author of the 2nd book. He doesn't remember where it is. David Schooley, who was one of the founding members of San Bruno Mountain Watch, said, "I think I know where it is." So he took Doug and I out, and we found it. And that's why there's 3 plants And I know this because that's what they planted there, and they're doing very well. And I showed that, oh, and then we wanted to find out the other two plantings, because Elizabeth says in her book, they planted in 3 places without anybody writing down where they were. So Doug and I have gone up and down every ridge that's nearby. We've gotten poison oak and berry thorns and everything. We've never found any of the other plantings. I showed this to one of East Bay botanists, and he wanted to go see it again. So he started to go there, and he got lost. And he found the second growth of them. And there was a rock on top of some chicken wire. You take the rock off, you take the chicken wire off, and your little white stakes that go in a plant pot. It said our Leo Brewery. They wanted us to find it. We photographed it. Rock is back there, and the stake is still there.
Nice.
So that's why we have Leo Brewery. It's just an incredible story. This is my anthemum up in the Pacific Northwest. It's common. We're a southern limit, and they only grew in one place along Radio Road, and some yo-yo dumped a bunch of trash on top of it and killed it. But it was in the East Bay Regional Park Garden, and they gave it back to us. Steve Edwards and I have talked about it, and so it's growing down in the bottom. It will flower. It's supposed to have a beautiful little red and white striped berry. It's never grown a berry. We've got it in cultivation, watering it all the time. We can't get it to grow a berry. So false lily valley, my anthemum. Mayflower, what it stands for. Cute little thing. The heartstock is probably all about 3 to 4 inches. Right along the bog trail, you can see it as you go. And this is dune tansy. It was extirpated on the mountain, reintroduced 2 places, no one knew where. And luckily, a person hiking there found a new fern and sent me a picture of the fern. And here's the fern. Whoops, we'll go back. Can we go backwards? No. Okay. It's the dune tansy. We have it now growing in 2 places, one right along Radio Road, hidden place, should be safe. We've got another over by the main parking lot. And the Park Service has only brushed it twice. So we put a fence up and they brushed around the fence. So we put up a little barrier right around the plant, and hopefully it will stay. But it's tough. I'll just show you a couple of limited distribution when it's pretty late because some people are falling asleep. This is Arisolochia, okay, pipeline. The pipeline swallowtail eats this plant, gets a toxin and protects it from birds. This is the flower. It's really wild. I'm sure a bunch of you have seen it. And in cross section, the insects come in from the right through this path, and this is the flower where the nectar is, where they're going. And this is the pollinator. We know this because we got it from the inside of an Arisolochia. Okay, so what's new? All right. Elizabeth McClintock was at the California Academy of Sciences, and she wrote this in 1968. It's part of the Proceedings of the Academy. It has a couple of flower pictures, very few, black and white. It is hard to get a hold of. In 1990, CNPS published a revision. They now had about a dozen pictures of not flowers, just general areas in black and white. How can you have a flower book that's black and white with no pictures of flowers? So that's what got us started in doing it. So we did this. It's a 500-page book. I've got one here. You can look at it. It's 2 pounds, 11.5 ounces. So it's a big baby, and it was hard to give birth to it. It took us about 10 years, but it's in color because color is what makes it. And we're trying to set a new standard for local floras in that rather than just having a picture of the flower, you have a picture of the flower, the leaf, often the whole plant, and then anything that's interesting or special about it, a thorn, dissect the flower, some sort of thing like that. And not only that, we have a lot of other things. It's a whole ecosystem. And if you talk about the angiosperms and nothing else, you're missing the point. So we have lichens. We have bryophytes. Aren't you glad we got bryophytes in the book? And bryophytes are the mosses. And here you see on the top, the dry mosses on the left and the wet mosses on the right, because you might go out in the summer and it's dry, how are you gonna recognize it to give you a wet one? And conversely, if you go up there in the winter, how are you gonna recognize it? So we've got both. So mosses, liverworts, and hornworts are the bryophytes. There's only one hornwort that we found up there. I was looking for a hornwort when I got stuck and got helicoptered out. Then we have the vascular plants, life cycles, pictures of spores. And in order to help you find it, there are pages of color pictures. And, you know, if you find a DYF, here they are, or whatever color, you can hopefully find your plant really quickly. I like to see all books have that. Now, we try to have interesting features. A lot of people don't know that poison oak has a flower. It has to, it's interesting, right? And it's got a seed, it's got beads, little berries that dry, and the birds love them in the winter. So we try to have multiple pictures of everything. This is, gosh. Yeah, hazelnut. And you've probably never seen a flower of hazelnut, but we got them. So, and also our mountain was saved from development by butterflies. This is the only place anywhere, you can't find on the internet, only in the book, top and bottom of a male and female of each of the 4 species. I took these photographs at the California Academy of Sciences, because you can tell the mountains. You might see we have 3 native and 1 invasive snail. There's a visitor guide, a map, and we're trying to give you an introduction to the entire ecosystem of San Bruno Mountain. You can get it at Heyday Books, and hopefully soon it'll be in the CNPS bookstore. I'll see you on the mountain. Thank you. And before we do questions, I'd like to just make a proposal. I'm on a committee with David Magny, all the rare plant chairs are, and they're trying to do local floras.
Right. We heard about that today.
Right, and the local floras are just a list of the plants and possibly a dichotomous key. And as you all know, dichotomous keys are written by people who don't need them for people who can't use them. All right. And I volunteered for the committee because this is, to me, a local flora. I mean, that's what Elizabeth called her book. And to me, it's a picture book. So we've had a discussion in the committee that we need to tighten up our terminology. And a local flora could be a scientific flora with a list, comprehensive list of all the plants. And that's very needed for scientific purposes. You're doing an EIR, you want to know that. But the people who go out on a hike with you, the common member of CNPS, what they want is a picture book. So we're going to call this a local flora, and there's the scientific flora. And I would like to see CNPS encourage every chapter to do a flora for their area, because the majority of knowledge is not in a book. It's in people's heads. And when that person passes, that's gone. What we need to do is encourage our local chapters to write floras like this. All right, I'm open to questions. When can I go home?
It's a long day to spend that. But that's okay. So I had a question about the wallflowers that I spend time on Coyote Ridge in South San Jose, where we have another population of the San Francisco wallflower, which is bright yellow and this high. And then I visited them with Chuck and Loretta
Yes.
last spring up, and you have big, tall, pale ones. So
Well, no, sometimes you pale or sometimes you yellow. And our gentleman here said he's got a grad student who's trying to study that. And
Yeah, so we're gonna. And so
I think
in
you
about
might have told me that, yeah, you're.
6 months, we'll have a good sense for whether they're actually separate or not. or-
Because it's a rare plant that's in San Francisco Bay Area, the Franciscan wildflower, but it's widely separated in these 2 areas, so.
well, have you ever struggled with the species problem? If you look under Wikipedia, the species problem, they quote Brett Michelin, and he's put a good
Yes.
part of his career in that. We've had discussions, but I think people would agree that genus is somewhat arbitrary, right? Family is arbitrary. And he wants to maintain that species is also arbitrary for this very reason, that you've got the San Francisco wallflower on San Bruno Mountain and the San Francisco wallflower on County Ridge, and they're different plants. We expect them to be genetically slightly different, that's Darwin and everything, right? Widely separated, start to drift, etc. But the species problem is very interesting. Just go to Wikipedia, do the species problem. It's very interesting. We depend on it on what we're talking about, but it may not be a good scientific term.
I have a question, we're getting in, then this, can't talk anymore, San Mateo in the San Francisco. I have seen reports of, like giant trillium being dug up for whatever reason, that's just poaching.
Yeah.
Do you experience poaching on the mountain as well?
We've not caught anybody poaching. We have found San Bruno Mountain plants in a nursery that did not have a collecting permit, and that got reported to the county, and that followed up on that. Our trillium is so rare, and you got to try so hard to find it. It's for instance, in our book, we don't say where it is because we've been asked to not give the location. So people aren't going to poach that, but they're going to poach our stone crop. I mean, that grows right by the road in certain places.
Yeah.
And you'll find a number of manzanitas called roof manzanita from San Bruno Mountain, collected probably before it was a park. So we're certainly aware of the problem statewide. We monitor for it. Doug and I are both site monitors and site stewards. I guarantee you we'd call the county if we ever caught anybody doing anything like that.
Yeah.
So far, it's not. But with this book, it's going to get to be a more popular park,
Yeah.
and it's going to happen.
Yeah.
I don't know if the county's ready for it.
Yeah, I don't think poaching has any comparison to New Manhattan, but that's another story. How much did the helicopter rescue get you back?
It was very lucky. I didn't get charged for it.
Really?
Apparently, what I forget. If the Coast Guard pulls you out, you don't get charged, but if CHP pulls you out, it's 52,000. So yeah, it was like a 60-second ride. I mean, that's even more expensive than Disneyland. But luckily I didn't get charged.
Very lucky.
Oh, yeah. It was an amazing story. It's written up on the San Bruno Mountain Watch website if you want to read. It is fun.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. Lichens are not plants, they're fungi.
And then I didn't fungi. Go ahead.
Okay, so in the genus Neva, which I worked on and published in 1996, I described one species from San Bruno Mountain only found there. Like his daughter.
A lichen?
Yeah.
Be interested in hearing about it.
Yeah, right. Now, you were talking about the species problem, and the other side of the story is that it's that particular species that I described as part of this widespread species that stretches from Marin County all the way, or from Sonoma County all the way down to southern Baja California, Guadalupe. It's a completely different concept. But then we add one little story to that. There's been 2 DNA studies recently published. Both of them, I'm co-author on both of them. One was senior on one of them, we found that there's a lot of it's microendemic species. So very likely the San Bruno Mountain species, which I named Diabla haley, is going to be a good species. All right, it still remains to be worked out with all these other 40 or so species that I described in that genus. And just to add a little more flavor to it, in Marin County, which is where the type for the one widespread species comes from, we call Naval Mallia. Type locality has actually 2 species of cryptic species. They look alike, but genetically they're different. So that's there's also hybridization in that genus. So it's a really complex genus, but the one from San Bruno Mountain called Naval haley will likely be extended.
Excellent. And there's one rare moss up there.
And it's going off from there, and I can't, and I spent a long time ago, and I'm not sure just exactly where I'm saying. I'll send you the
Yeah, I'd love to have the information.
page for it.
I'd love to hear it.
And the specimen is in Minnesota, and the other one is in the University of Colorado. at Bolton.
Okay, great. We've had the opportunity, because we've been doing this with more or less any scientist that comes up from elsewhere in the country, they want to get a tour, so we give them tours, so we get to pick their brain. It's been really amazing. It's been a lot of fun. There's one, another plant, Indian paintbrush that an expert feels is unique, and that's in process. Doug happened to know where, the guy said, you know, it looks like such. Doug showed him pictures. Yeah, that's it. I think that's it. So Doug showed it to him. I was there when we went out. It was fun. Any other questions? Well, thank you. You've been a good audience. It's been fun to try to prepare this for you. And if you want a copy, Heyday Books is selling. All right. Thank you.
We do field trips sometimes, right?
Oh, absolutely. They're published in the Urban Botanist chapter website. Doug and I do trips about 6 times a year. Doug leads them. He knows the plants vastly better than I do. And he is a great teacher. One thing that attracted me to him is he didn't make me feel like an idiot, and yet he knew a tremendous amount. He's a great tour guide, and he lives on the edge of San Bruno Mountain. So yeah, just look at the Urban Botanist chapter calendar. We do them all the time. We'd love to have you up there.
We did have a trip with Chuck and Loretta last spring, so that was really good too.
Yes.
You know.
Oh, absolutely. They donated more money to this book than any other person. They were very, very generous. Our chapter helped to support it because Heyday Book said, we'll do it for you, but you got to raise $75,000. We raised $25,000. We're only $50,000 short. My co-author cashed out part of his retirement, put up $50,000, and that's the reason why you had this book.
Everybody buy coffee.
Well, we don't make any money.
Oh.
Heyday does. But Doug was happy to do it. It's his life's work. It's only been 10 years of mine, but he's been working at it for 30 years. He just couldn't get across the finish line. I helped him with that. All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
It's recorded, so assuming the recording is good, I will post it at some point.
Great. Great.
We'll send a note out to everybody.
I'm just gonna run this into the kitchen.
Hi, everybody. I think we're gonna end the Zoom now. It's great to see you all today. Drive carefully.
Beauties are gonna be a field trip tomorrow.
Yes.
Where did we get the information from?